And the next thing that we want to do is add in some plants. Now we've kind of got our ground covered and we're ready to add some plants. So to do that, we're going to add in all of the plant feature classes we have in our data model. And there are 3 that we're going to be interested in today. So first we'll go to Add Data. And it should go right to our base map feature data set. And we'll scroll over to the M's. And we're going to select mass planting. And we also want to add in the Plant Center feature class and the Plant Center annotation feature class. And to do that, you can hold down the Control key and click on the additional names, and it'll select. It'll add that to your selection. And when you're done, you can hit the Add button. It'll add all 3 of those layers to the top of our table of contents. And if you find your table of contents is starting to get filled up and you can't see what's going on, you can always click the minus button next to the title or name of each layer, and it'll kind of contract that so those don't take up quite as much room for you. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is, as we've been doing, we need to create new templates for these so that we can draw these guys in. But first let me talk about what these 3 layers are a little bit. So as we looked at the Arnold Arboretum data set, we saw lots of dots on the map, and each one of those dots was generally a plant center. So the way we set the data model up is that we generally map our plants with a point located at the approximate center of the plant, or the point where the trunk or the stem goes into the ground. And now sometimes you'll come across plants in your collection that are maybe too complex to map as individuals, or too dynamic. Maybe they die back to the ground every year and come up in different spots, and maybe you're more interested in actually just putting a line around the outside of those plants, or drawing a polygon around them that delineates their boundary, and saying that we've got maybe this 3 species that grow inside of this particular polygon. And that way it lets, it kind of lowers our maintenance. It doesn't mean that we have to map those plants frequently to be able to keep up with their changes, or if they all are growing together and they're really complicated to deal with, we can just kind of rope them all together and deal with them that way. So the way the data model works is that when we draw a polygon around a group of plants, we call it a mass planting, and then for each species that grows inside that polygon, we place a point, a plant center point, arbitrarily in there to identify the characteristics of that species. So if we had a polygon with 3 species of wildflower all growing together in there, we would draw a line around the outside and place 3 points and enter the taxonomic information and attributes of those 3 species attached to those points. And then we link the polygon and those points together so that when you click on that polygon, you can see which 3 species easily grow inside of that. Any questions on that? And we'll experiment with both of those here in a minute. And then the 3rd layer that we have here is called Plant Center Annotation. And this is labels that draw on a map associated with our center points. So as you see here, we've done some work with dynamic labeling, and these labels we just turned on. We quickly set them, and if we move around, you'll see that these labels will redraw every time we move. So as I zoom in, we'll see that these labels have now resized themselves and moved so that they fit on the screen appropriately. So if I continue to zoom in, we'll see that all these labels, they're a little further out, but now they move in and they all redraw so that we can see them. I'll hit the back button a couple times just to get back to where I was. So these are called dynamic labels, and they redraw as necessary in the most appropriate location that's available to them. Now when you're making a map of your garden, you may have lots of plants growing in a pretty small area. So it can be a little complicated when these labels are trying to place themselves, and the computer may not be able to place them automatically. So we have a different type of labeling called annotation, which are fixed labels, and you place them where you want to, and they don't move. So this makes it really nice for making cartographic quality maps that you're going to share with people. You can really control the placement and look of the labels, and they'll stay fixed, and you can even apply things like leader lines and whatnot to make things look better and easier to read. So right now this Plant Center annotation is linked to our Plant Center layer here. And every time we add a plant center and we enter the scientific name and the accession number for this plant, a label will automatically be created that we can then reposition to work best for our map purposes. Any questions on that? We'll see how that works in action here in a little bit. Okay, so now to start editing these guys, we need to create some templates for them. So we'll go to our Create Features palette here. And then we'll go to Organize Templates. Click on New Template, and I want to make one for our annotation, our plant center, and our mass planting layers. So I'll click on those, and it'll create templates for all three of these all at once. Unclick anything else, and then hit Finish, and then hit Close. And if we scroll down in our templates, now we have one for plant center, we've got one for mass planting, and we should be good to go.
Can you just repeat that, please?
Yeah, so to create templates for the annotation here, we're gonna, for the three new layers, the plant layers we added, we're gonna go to Organize Templates, click on New Template, select the layers that we want to create the templates for, which are our plant center annotation, our plant center, and our mass planting. And click on Finish. I'm not going to do that because I already have done it. And then hit Close, and they should show up on our Create Features palette here on the side. All right, so to demonstrate the process of creating some plants, I think we're going to start over here in our southeast corner planting area. I'm going to zoom into the big plants that we can see kind of with pretty decent shadows over here in the corner. And I'm going to turn off my planting area feature class so I can get a better view of what I'm working on. And then I'm just going to place some points at what I think are about the center of these guys. And we could go out in the field and collect this data. We could take a GPS unit out and collect an accurate position, but we're going to take the quick and dirty approach here and just place these points off of what we think is right from the photograph. So you can see under Plant Center, we have a couple choices for different types of plant centers we can create. We can either create a mass planting point, which would be a point that is part of a group of plants, as we were talking about before, or a plant center for just an individual. This is what we're going to do right now. We're just going to map these trees here, or shrubs. So I'm going to click on the Plant Center template. I'm going to go to the approximate center of this big guy right here and place our point right in the middle of it. And unlike the other features we'd be creating that are polygons, this one is a point, so it just takes a single click to add it to the map. And once we've got this guy added, we can add attributes to it, just as we've done for all of our other feature classes or layers. And click on the Attributes palette, and we can see a whole list of attributes that we looked at in the Arnold Arboretum data set that can be associated with this plant. So unlike all of the other feature classes we worked with so far today, we've set the ID to be equal to the object ID at the top. Now for plants, we do this a little bit differently. Is that generally our ID numbers are set up to give kind of a unique number to each feature that we're keeping. And now in this case, we may want to link our plants in our GIS to another database. A lot of gardens, as I mentioned, have plant records databases that they keep lots of information in. And we may want to link these to information in that. And the general way to do that is through this plant ID field. So in this case, most plant record systems use a combination of what's called an accession number to identify their plants, and then a qualifier for each unique plant that has that same accession number. Is there anybody who's not familiar with accession numbers here? But probably a few people who are from outside the garden world. So generally, when a new group of plants comes in, they'll get accessioned or added to your plant collection, and we assign those an accession number. And it's possible for a plant, say we get 5 new manzanitas come in, and those manzanitas all receive the same accession number, but we'll give them all unique qualifier numbers. So we'll assign them qualifier A, B, C, D, and E for those 5 plants, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that represents what number plant they are with that same number. And all we're really going to need to know today is that we're going to construct our plant center ID from the combination of that accession number plus that unique qualifier number. So, as an example today, we'll just use an accession number of today's year. Maybe our plant came in today, it's 2012, and I'll give it a dash, and then we'll say this is maybe the 56th plant we received today, so it's 2012-56. And then we've got 5 plants with that number. This is the 5th one, so we'll call it a qualifier of 5. And then we combine those 2 numbers to create our plant center ID. So we'll do 2012-56-5. And each garden tends to do this in a different way, but these fields are set up to accommodate whatever kind of system you use at your garden. And if you're going to be using this for a purpose that is that doesn't accession their plants, or a place that doesn't accession their plants, you can continue to follow the rule that we've been using so far today of just sending the plant center ID equal to the object ID. So you could just put 1 in this box.
Could you talk about how you can turn field off?
Oh yeah, sure. So you'll notice after I enter the plant center ID that the number that we typed in automatically shows up on the map, and that's our plant center annotation being constructed for us. And as soon as we add a scientific name to this plant, that will also show up on here. So as we go down through the fields, we may want to add some additional information to this. We may want to set the habit of the plant. Currently is set to unknown, but I actually know that this is a tree, so I will set it to be a tree from that drop-down list. And then for the family of the plant, you could select a family by clicking on it and select one from the drop-down list. And since we're in our Ericaceae section, I'm going to select that this plant is part of our Ericaceae family. So we'll select that. And then we've got a group of fields here that can break down the different parts of a scientific name into pieces. So there's a field for the genus of the plant, a field for the species, a field for the cultivar name, and so on. But we're not going to use these fields today. We could spend the time to fill them in, but I just want to fill in the complete scientific name. And maybe we want to turn these fields off so we don't see them. So we'll show you how to do that here in a minute. So for the scientific name, who's got a scientific name for this plant for us? Anybody know any plants in the Ericaceae family? Mia? You got one for us?
We were looking at one last night that
Yeah.
you said you really liked.
You're going to enter it for us?
Remember?
Yeah.
The rhododendron.
Yeah.
We're
So
going to enter it.
provide me with the scientific name for it, Mia.
Rhododendron, I have no idea.
Let's call Mia.
Rhododendron. What's the most common rhododendron in Massachusetts? We don't really grow rhododendron.
We don't have Maxima. So you can type in whatever scientific name you'd like there. And once you're done, and when you hit enter or move on to the next field, you should see that that scientific name automatically gets added to our annotation on the map. And you could type in an abbreviated name here if you, and then choose to have that show up on the map. Sometimes if your maps get really crowded, it's more convenient to use an abbreviated name. Rhododendron's pretty long. I think at the Arboretum we probably just use R.Maxima for that. If you know a common name for that, you could put that into the common name field. If you're out in the field doing a survey, you may want to take a note of the condition. Right now the plant condition defaults to alive. We're assuming that you're not mapping any dead plants. So we put alive in here, but if you're out in the field you may want more information. You may want to say it's an excellent or good or fair or poor condition, so you could note that here. One of the things that that we've set this up to do is that plants will die, and they also will come back to life sometimes. Sometimes you may think that a plant is dead, and we could change our condition to dead on this and then set up our map so that those dead plants don't show anymore, but we're keeping the data on those. And then 6 months from now you go out there and you find that that plant has come back to life. You can just change its condition back to alive or whatever condition it's in, and at that point it will reappear on your map. And that's done through a definition query, which I'll just demonstrate really quickly. If you double click on our plant center layer, you could go to the definition query tab, and you could set up a quick query to say, I only want to see, you guys don't have to follow along with this, just or repeat, or I'll just demo it for you. I could set it up so that we set it to plant condition equals to alive, and then it'll only show plants with a condition of alive. So there's ways to filter out our dead plants without throwing away that information. Back to entering attributes here. If you know a size, if you're out in the field, you may want to record the DBH of this plant. You can also use this field to record the canopy radius or diameter, whatever size units you want. We usually use the size to be able to scale symbols on the map, so you can eventually make maps that show large trees with larger symbols and small trees with smaller symbols, and so on. So this plant size field can be used for that, so you can enter whatever you'd like there. You can set the units for that as well. From this section name drop-down, you could click here and we could enter the name of the section that we're in. And now this list only says unknown and other, but we may want to add our South Ericaceae section to that. So we'll go and do that in just a minute so that we can have this available from a drop-down here. If you use a grid system at your garden, sometimes people will create a grid system and then create a map for each part of that grid. You could enter the cell name there. The latitude and longitude values for this you could fill in or automatically have those calculated using that tool that I briefly talked about earlier. You can enter the date that this plant went in the ground. Importantly though, you always want to enter the date that you're first mapping this. So today's date we're going to enter in this survey date field because this is the date that we're adding it. So I'm going to hit today from the little calendar drop down. And then right here in the username fields, I also, when I click this drop down, I don't have any options to add my name on here, so I'm just going to put new user for now, and then we can go and we can add our own names to this so that when we click that field, it'll be available to us. And then if somebody down the road goes and makes some changes to this data, they can enter the date and their name in these update fields to keep track of that. And then as you go down here, you see there's a bunch of fields for different IDs that we can link different feature classes together here. In this particular one, it looks like the only one that we're using is planting area, so we could enter the ID of this planting area. And to find out what the ID is, use the identify tool and click in that planting area. And you'll see if you're not doing things, if you're not careful, we've turned off planting area, so it didn't actually select that. So I actually have to turn planting areas back on, and then use the identify tool again, and then it's giving us the southeast corner planting area, and it says that its ID is 2. So we can close that and put 2 in the planting area ID, and then that plant will be linked to that planting area. All right, any questions on that so far? Alright, so a couple things that we want to do here is maybe the next time we add a plant, we don't want to see all these individual taxonomy fields here, since we're not going to be entering those. Turn those off. Let's go double click on our plant center feature class or layer in the table of contents. And if that gives you trouble, you can right click and hit properties. And across the top, you can go to the fields tab. And this gives us a list of all the fields that are in this layer, and we can turn off the ones we're not going to use. So we're not going to use the any of those individual taxonomy fields, because I'm going to turn off the ones between intergeneric hybrid and description, and hit OK. And now the next time we add a plant, we won't see those fields over here. And now we also encountered a couple spots where we wanted some extra values in those drop-down lists. So we can go and we can add our name into those drop-down lists for the username fields, and we can add the names of those sections into the drop-down list for the section name field. So let's do that really quick. If you go to the window menu, and we can open the catalog window, and instead of having to switch over to our catalog, we can just get a kind of a quick view of the catalog from here, and we can make some data changes to our database from here. So all of those domains we were talking about earlier, those drop-down list values, if we want to make any changes to those, we have to make changes to those in the database. So at the top here, you should see, it should say UC Davis Arboretum with the gray cylinder icon. That's our geodatabase. If we right-click on that and hit Properties, it brings up the database properties. And on the Domains tab, you'll see a list of all the different drop-down lists that we have set up for this database. And there's quite a few of them. But we've generally tried to name them so that they are the same, they're named the same as the field name they're associated with. So if we want to change the, any of the username fields, we scroll down to username, and there's our username domain. And if you click on it, at the bottom of the screen where it says coded values, it'll show you what values are available in this drop-down list. And now you could set this up so that if you entered a code into the field, it would display the full name. So instead of putting South Eric KCE in, we could just type SE and it would show us the whole name. But actually, it works out a lot better if we actually type that name out, because it leaves the data a lot less cryptic. So what we've done is we set it up so that both the code and the description values are the same. So if we wanted to add, say, our name to this list, we would just type it both in the blank area here, on both sides in the blank area. So under New User, I'm going to just click and type in my name. And you can do the same for yourself. And then you can hit the tab or click under New User under Description and add your name in on both sides so it looks like this. And then click OK. And then if we want to open that catalog back up again, it kind of hides itself over on the side. You can click on Catalog on the side of the screen here. Now I want to add the names of our section to the section name domain. So again, I'll right-click on the database, hit Properties, and I will scroll down this list until I find the S's. Click on the section name domain, and I can add the names of our sections, which we have North Eric KCE. Type it on both sides. And South Eric KCE. And you can use the tab key to move between fields. And when we're all done, we can hit OK on this. And now those names should be available to us in the drop-down list. Now sometimes when you make these changes, you may have to actually exit ArcMap and reopen it to get those changes to take effect. We'll see how that goes here today. But it's always a good idea to save your edits periodically. So from the editor drop-down, we'll do Save Edits. And that'll save those new plants that we added and the new pathway we've added since the last time we saved. Alright, so now let's see. I think now what we can do is try to add a group of plants in. So if we hit the back to previous extent arrow here, should zoom back to so we can see our whole section. And I'm going to use the zoom in tool, zoom into our southeast corner planting area. And zoom even a little bit further in. And turn off my planting area layer so I can see clearly the photo. And then you can kind of see this big chunk of plants that are all growing together along the boundary here. And we're going to draw a mass planting around this and say that there's two different species of plant growing together right here. So to do that, we follow the usual steps we've been following, and we will click on our Create Features palette here. And if you look at under mass planting, we have quite a few different templates here, and basically these templates are set up depending on how many different species are growing inside this polygon. And so we have one for homogeneous, meaning that all the plants are exactly the same. We've got one for 2 species, 3 species, 4, 5, or 5 or more. And we're going to say that this is 2 species, so I'm going to grab the template for mixed 2 species. And then I'm going to start tracing a polygon around this group of plants. And now, when you're doing stuff that's more curvilinear, you probably want to place the vertices a little bit closer together. And as you get close to other objects, you may notice that your cursor tries to snap to those. So to avoid that, you may want to zoom in a little bit more, and that makes it so that doesn't happen. But today we're just doing the quick and dirty, so I wouldn't worry about perfection too much. And when you get back to the beginning, double click, and that closes our polygon for us. Now, if you didn't add too many vertices to this guy as you were drawing it in, you may end up with a very jagged, unorganic looking shape for your plants. For when you're making maps, you may want it to look a little bit nicer, and we can use some tools really quick to smooth this guy out. If you go to the Customize menu here, and under Toolbars, we can add in the Advanced Editing toolbar, and this gives us some extra tools for controlling this guy. And at the far right end of the Advanced Editing toolbar, there's a button called Smooth. I'm going to hit that guy. And it asks us, has this box for maximum allowable offset. And what this is how much it's going to move or adjust the vertices that we just placed here. And since we think we've done a halfway decent job mapping this and we don't want everything to be shifted too much, I'm just going to enter a value of 0.5, which is half a foot or 6 inches. So that means that it's only going to scoot this plant around or scoot these vertices around 6 inches at a maximum, so that it's actually not making it too much worse or decreasing the accuracy of our data, but it's just making it look a little bit nicer. So I'll hit OK. And then you can see it smooths that polygon out, and it looks a little nicer, and it'll represent a little bit better when we print things out. Alright, I'm going to close the Advanced Editing toolbar here by clicking on the X in the upper right, since we're done with that. And now I want to, just like we've done for all the other features we created, we want to enter attributes about it. So we'll click on the Attributes tab here. You can see there's not too many fields or not too much data to record about these mass plantings. Most of the information about what's inside these polygons is kept with the plant centers that we're going to place inside of it here in a little bit. So for now, we're just going to follow our usual rules here. Our mass planting ID is the same as the object ID, so we'll set it to 1. Since we selected a template, it already has the mixed 2 species type filled in. If this has a name, we can enter names. Anyone want to take a stab at what we want to call this mass? Maybe there's 2 plants growing together. Remember one of our error case sections. Does anyone have any ideas for this guy?
Laurel Canyon.
What's that?
Laurel Canyon.
Laurel Canyon. And what's that refer to?
Well, Laurel is an error case, but it's a movie.
Okay, well, I'll go with that. Why not? This is your own garden, I guess now. So, All right, so now we have the Laurel Canyon mass planting here. And then the size, we have a planting size field here that can be somewhat handy for estimating the size of or the number of individuals inside of this. Sometimes curators need to count how many specimens they have in their garden, and when you're planting a whole swath of grass plugs, you may not want to really count the individuals, but may more be interested in the rough amount. So we've created some quick ranges here, and you can click this drop down and see these really broad ranges. And you can, just the way that we added things to our section name and username domains, you could change these list of values to be whatever you'd like. So we're just going to say that this is small. We know that there's just a few specimens in here, so we'll click on small. And under our section name domain, we can click, and now, hey, when we click on this, we now see that our North and South Ericaceae sections are in this drop down. So we can select our South Ericaceae section. And then one thing I haven't talked about yet is that we have another boundary in our data model, or our template for collections. Sometimes we have groups of plants that may span the boundaries that we've drawn in for our sections. For instance, at UC Davis, we have a collection of plants from the Sierra woodland that are in multiple sections of our garden. So we may want to draw a line around those, but they don't really follow our traditional garden boundaries. So we have, but they share kind of there's a similarity in that all these plants are from a similar group. So we want to call those a collection. And we have another feature class called collection where you could draw those boundaries in. And if these plants were part of that collection, you could, there's a drop-down list here that we could add values to and assign those plants to that collection. So we won't be using that today, but that's available for you if you want. And then with most of these plant fields we have, our plant feature classes, we have a date for when this plant was surveyed, and that's today. We're mapping this guy today, so we'll select that from the calendar. And then if we click on the survey username, you should now see your name available in that drop-down list. So you can say that you mapped this plant, or group of plants. And then when somebody goes and makes an update to it, they can fill in their information as well. And that's all we're going to do on this guy. Now we want to add the center points for the two, or just the points for the two species that are growing inside this. So to do that, we go to the Create Features palette. And this time, instead of selecting the plant center template, we're going to select mass planting. And this will show up in a different color and have some different properties for us available. So if you click on mass planting under the plant center group of templates, and now we can just place these points. Unlike other points for other plants that we're mapping, all we have to do is place these arbitrarily inside of this polygon, and that way it will link them together and or somewhat link them together for us. So we'll just click and put a point on this part of the polygon. I usually like to put them more towards the center. And then once that's in there, you can click on the Attributes palette, and you'll see the familiar list of attributes that we were looking at for the plants. We can assign an accession number to it. So maybe this is another one that's come in this year, and it's the 78th plant. And maybe we got a group of these in, and this was the fourth one of those, so it's got a qualifier of 4. Together, those numbers create a plant center ID for us. And again, if you're not interested in doing that, you can just enter the same number as the object ID. And once we enter that, it should label on the map for us. We can select the growth habit of this plant. Maybe we've got some shrubs in this mass, so we'll say shrub. We can select a family from the drop-down list. Since we're in our Ericaceae section, we will stick with our Ericaceae family. And what's the scientific name of a laurel that is growing in Laurel Canyon here?
Calmia montana.
So you can enter that in, and again, as soon as you type that in, it's going to label on the map for us. And one thing to notate here is that plants that are part of a mass planting, they label with white letters with a black outline. And plants that are just individuals will label with black letters with a white outline. And this helps us be able to determine whether a plant is part of a mass or not when you're looking at your collection maps.
When you draw a polygon like that, can it determine the area? Yeah,
actually, after we finish entering the attributes of this, I can actually show you really quick. If you have it selected, you can see at the bottom of the list of attributes that we have these two fields that are grayed out. One is shape underscore length, and the other is shape underscore area. And the shape underscore length represents actually not the length of this object, but more the perimeter around the outside of it. And that's automatically calculated using the same units that we have set in our spatial reference, which, if you remember, that's feet. And if you forget that, it's kind of said down in the lower right-hand corner of our screen here. It says that our coordinates are all in feet. And then similarly, the area is automatically calculated for this guy, and that's in square feet. Okay, so to continue entering attributes about this guy, we've put in our scientific name. You can enter a common name if you want. You can put the condition of this plant if you know it. And you'll see in this particular case that the size of this plant is defaulted to 0. The reason is that since we've actually defined the size of this group of plants by drawing this line around the outside of it. So therefore, we're probably not interested in measuring the dBH or the canopy radius of this particular plant because it's already kind of been outlined. So it automatically defaults to 0, so we'll leave that as is. We can enter the section name from our drop-down list. We can enter our survey date as being today. Enter a username from the drop-down list as yourself. And then importantly here, to be able to link this plant to this mass planting, we have to enter the ID number of that mass. So you could, if you've forgotten it, you can use the identify tool to quickly click on it and see that its ID number is 1. So we can enter that right here, and now those two will be linked together. And then similarly, we want to put the ID number of this planting area in there. Now, to do that, I have to turn on the planting areas, identify it, find out that its ID is also 1, and then enter that in that field. Now if I grab my editor tool here from next to the editor menu, I can click on my planting area, see that this is the southwest corner planting area in the upper right of the attributes palette. And I can see that it contains this Kalmia montanum that we put in here, and that is also linked to the Laurel Canyon planting area. And you can even see the annotation that's on the map that's related to that. So you can see how everything's connected here. Okay, so if you remember, we said that there's actually 2 species of plant in this, so we need to add one more plant center point to this map, or to this mass. So to do that, we'll select the mass planting subtype template from the plant center group here, and we'll place this one arbitrarily inside of our polygon. And in the same fashion, we can enter our accession number. This one maybe is a little older. We got this plant in 2002. And maybe it's the 14th one of these. That makes our plant center ID equal the combination of those two. As soon as we add it, it's added to our map. We can select a habit. Maybe this is also a shrub in our Ericaceae family. And who's got another scientific name for a laurel? Anybody? Are we getting to the edge of our knowledge here? You can. What, which one is it? What's the genus? All right.
Tell me with a K, by the way.
Oh, it is. All right. See? You guys got to tell me all this information. All right. And then you can enter an abbreviated name for that if you want. Common name, condition, our section name. Our survey date. And importantly, we want to put in the ID number of our mass planting as 1. And if I remember that our planting area ID is also 1. And now all these are linked together. And now I'm embarrassed that I have this horrible taxonomic spelling error on my map. So I want to go back and fix this guy. So to do that, we can just select the plant. And sometimes the labels get placed over those. If I want to place that label so we can see it a little bit better, I can use my edit tool. I can move that label to wherever I want it. Maybe I'd like it off to the side. I can place that there. And then if I want to select my plant to make a change to that, I'll select it, go to the scientific name, correct the spelling on it, and you'll see that that label automatically gets updated. Any questions on any of that stuff? Yeah.
Does this record specific donation by, the donor's name and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so any of the features that are in the model, you could add a field. Remember how I said add field? And you can add a field for a donor's name. So you may have a bench that's dedicated, you may have a rock that's dedicated, you may have trees that are dedicated. So any one of those things, you could add a donor name into that.
And then can you search on those so you can pull up all donors?
Sure. Yeah. Then once you have that those in there, you could use the search features in ArcMap to be able to search for the name of a particular donor in any one of the layers that you have added to your map, if you'd like. All right. So let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break, and we can come back. Let's see. I don't know, just before 2:45, something like that. And we'll spend some time trying to simulate the process of taking this data out into the field on a mobile device.